Hello and welcome to Dialogue's two-session special Agenda for Progress. While China's national defense policy is a topic that always captures international attention, with international strategic competition and regional security issues on the rise, how can we understand China's military modernization and reform? To shed some light on China's national defense, I'm joined by Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Strategy and Security at Tsinghua University, and Teng Jianxun, Director for the Center of Arms Control from China Institute of International Studies. That's our topic. I'm Zhou Yue. In his government work report, Premier Li says China will continue to boost its national military training and war preparedness across the board to make overall plans to deal with security risks in all areas. First of all, is it correct understanding that the security risks of China is deeper and more complex now?
Well, certainly, yes, because in China's periphery, if you look at this whole situation, you would find that since Trump administrations, Americans has apparently increased its military presence in this region, for example, with its so-called freedom of navigation operations. Then the Americans have a sense of worry because of China's ever-growing military strength. And if we look at the rest of the world, because China's national interests are becoming global, ubiquitous, therefore it really raises this question of how a stronger PLA should safeguard its national interest overseas. Because normally, for all countries, defending territory is understandable, but for major power, there are two things different. One is you may have your overseas interests, and this overseas interest could be anywhere for China, and besides, you have great powers and responsibilities for others. And then probably there is one area very few people think of, that is your interests are even in the outer space.
So, Mr. Cheng, I want your share on this. Do you think where might be the most challenging security risks? Is it in China's periphery, or is it in other areas?
Actually, this is a result of the so-called strategic competition between major powers. Zhou Bo just mentioned the United States has changed its policy toward Asia-Pacific region since Obama's administration. During Trump's administration, and the U.S. just initiated the so-called strategic competition. And under such circumstances, I think China's security environment, not only close to our border, but also in this region, I'm sure everyone knows that has been changed greatly. And the deployment of U.S. military facilities and some equipments, weapons, just gave such a threat to the security of our country and the sovereignty and the integrity of our country. So we should pay much attention to the security, national security of our country at this moment.
But the bigger context is, of course, China's fast growth and development.
Yes.
And
yes.
some people say your war preparedness and your national defense expenditure is commensurate with your national economic strength. China plans to boost its national defense by 6.8%. That is commensurate with our GDP growth. But if China keeps growing its national defense in the same rate as national economy, on one day it will probably catch up with the U.S.
Yeah.
And that will cause of conflict.
Our grand objectives are laid down the road to become modernized in 2035 and to become a world-class military by mid-century. So let me come back to your previous question. While we point out that the peripheral situation is becoming complicated, we must add one thing. That is, is the situation becoming worsened, or are we better off? Because China is getting stronger, therefore China also has a greater probability to shape the environment. So we always say in China that we are facing a situation not sitting.
But Zhou Bo, when by shaping the environment, does it mean threat or opportunity for the rest of the world? That is an open question for many people.
Yeah.
The U.S. and its Western allies considers this is a threat,
Yeah.
not an opportunity.
Well, for China, we always say we are still in the strategic period of time. That means even if we are witnessing a situation not seen in the last 100 years, still we have better opportunities than challenges. But this kind of challenges do not come from ever stronger China. Because if you look at China's behavior, what China becomes responsive are simply for those things that are associated with the territorial disputes, be it the South China Sea or be it along the line of actual control between China and the Indian borders. So we are not using pandemic whatsoever as a kind of weapon. So why should we do that?
So why there is a sharp differences of perception about China's newly gained power, military power? For example, the South China Sea islands. Of course, there are some military installations, but China said it is still defending its sovereignty in territorial waters, while the U.S. consider this as expansionist moves. Can they narrow their differences on this?
No, at this moment, I don't think the United States can narrow the differences in this regard, because the United States has taken China as the strongest competitor at this moment. And in their view, the Americans would like to say China's fast development just to change the balance of power in this region. And
But
also,
it does change the balance of power.
and
in this region.
also had changed the order, the regional system, which was dominated by the United States for decades. So this time they cannot absorb such an idea or such a fast development of China. So they manipulate such a dispute. For example, the dispute in the South China Sea between China and some claimants in that region. So this is actually an old trick played by the United States.
So is it correct to say that the China's narrative is that, well, China will challenge the supremacy of U.S. military power in this part of the world, but China says it is only natural for this to happen?
No, I don't think so. I think what is right for me to say is that we do not want to challenge the United States, but we're trying our best to maintain our rights and interests in this region. Because if you look at the facts, the fact
At the cost of eating away their strategic interests.
Well, it depends on how you define a strategic interest, but the simple fact is, it's American ships that come close to the waters of China's island and rocks. It's not the other way around. So we are fighting for our interests and the rights at our doorstep. But come back to your question, there is a different understanding of what is the right or the interest. China believes this is China's water, and these are Chinese islands and rocks. Americans say, no, this is yours, is excessive claims.
Okay, considering that probably it's not so easy to narrow the differences, can we keep the conflict, the odds of conflict, minimum? What is your estimate that will happen in the coming 4 years during Biden administration in the South China Sea, across this Taiwan Strait? Will the two militaries enter into any kind of conflicts, or it will keep this kind of a standoff, but vigilant?
I think it would be fair to say that both sides have realized that we are really having a crisis looming large. Because in last October, for the first time in our history, China, the Ministry of National Defense and the Pentagon had the first working group meeting on crisis communication management. Because previously, we always talk about accidents, incidents at sea, right? But now, for the first time, we're talking about the crisis. And that was made during...
So they do see this coming?
Yeah, they at least have called it crisis. And we agreed. We had the first meeting, and that was during Trump administration. That means even during Trump administration, some people in Pentagon was really thinking about this kind of a thing as a crisis. So both sides are determined to avoid conflict, to diffuse crisis. The only question is how.
Do we have a mechanism here that avoid crisis from happening?
Actually, there are some mechanisms between the two sides to manage the differences in the dispute in South China Sea, across Taiwan Strait. And I think at this moment, the number one job for us is to find a way to have a new, mentality toward each other. This is not face-to-face confrontation between the two major powers in the world. And if we change our mentality, especially the United States, can change the mentality, just have we call it mutual respect, win-win cooperation in regional affairs, in the South China Sea, in the situation across Taiwan Strait. We can find some very efficient mechanism in this regard for the sake of the two countries. But at this moment, I don't think the decision makers in the United States will give such a compromise, because they would like to manipulate the issue across Taiwan Strait and the issue, all the dispute in the South China Sea for their own sake, because this is a competition. The United States would like to say China is going to take the place.
Able to manage this without escalating into crisis, but keep it hanging in the air to act as a leverage.
So this is a coin with two sides. On one side, there should be some disputes or differences between China and the United States. But on the other side, I'm sure the two militaries, even today, are preparing to avoid any direct clash between the two militaries. This is a very important.
And obviously, there is another strategy that is developing. That is the alliance system of the U.S. Biden will call a Quad meeting with India, Australia, and Japan. And also some European allies has been asking their militaries to navigate the waters in South China Sea. How do you view this new development? How should China look at this?
I think China should not take it too seriously, because I can give you my comment on this Quad in one sentence. None of the four countries would like to sacrifice its own interest for the interest of all other three countries, which are strongly associated with China's interest, because China basically is.
All these Quad countries, the three other countries, have some conflicts with China, economically, military, ideologically.
But they are largest trading partners with China. So this is not a black or white and picture. So if you ask all these four countries, are you against China, or is this an anti-China club? They said no. So my conclusion is the Quad is definitely established because of China, although they would not say it is against China. But if you look at this club as a military alliance, India would totally deny.
So you're suggesting they're not wholeheartedly invested in this?
No, because this is just coming. This has come into shape. It's still developing, but it's difficult for them to decide which way they will go, be it military or be it economic.
What about the European allies, French and the British? They've been sending their submarines and frigates.
No, that basically are symbolic gestures to show the presence, to show the support for so-called freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. But they are far away. They would not come here simply to challenge China. For example, there is a difference. No one, except the United States, actually has sailed close enough to China's rocks and islands. All the other countries just chant freedom of navigation. They would not, even at the core of the United States, come closer or in joining hands with the United States to make a joint provocation toward China.
Okay, we are talking about China's national defense development and policies on our CGTN Dialogue special program, Agenda for Progress. Don't go away. We'll be back. Since the military reform 5 years ago, China has gone all in to reform its military. More joint forces drill and training, and also technological sophistication has been on the rise. What is your estimate of current capabilities of the Chinese military?
Well, that is a very good question. If you read China's National Defense White Paper, you would read sentences like, we are still far behind the military level of the developed Western countries. But if you read all the reports and documents of American think tanks in the last 2 to 3 years, they basically conclude that if there is a war in China's periphery or within the first chain of island, the United States doesn't have a short opportunity to win over China. And Americans commander of Indo-Pacific, while making a statement in the Senate. He acknowledged that. He acknowledged that they do not have absolute confidence of winning over China. So that's a very good point, because we do not have a war. So it's very hard to say who will win who. But indeed, there is a great change within the first chain of island, basically in the West Pacific, that China is getting stronger and stronger because of its holistic military strengths, be it location, be it logistics supply, be it joint strike capabilities. All these put together would make the Americans less confident about winning China in this area.
So what would be the response from the United States, considering that China's military capability is already got here, that United States is not 100% sure that it can win a war in the periphery of China?
Yeah, there are some arguments in the United States that the U.S. military should be well prepared to engage war with the PRA. Recently, the Pacific Command just initiated the so-called Indo-Pacific Deterrent Initiative, and which addressed the importance to deploy ballistic missiles and cruise missiles in the peripheral area very close to China. So this is actually military preparation from the U.S. side, and we should be well prepared in this area, because this is actually a result of the so-called strategic competition between China and the United States by the U.S. government. And I think we are facing actually a security dilemma for the two major powers at this moment, including in the South China Sea, across Taiwan Strait. How can we find a way out of such a dilemma? Each side targeted at the other side, and they would like to prefer the other side as the main competitor or adversary at this moment. So I think this is actually a very crucial moment or crossroad, not only for the political relations between the two countries, but also for the militaries at this moment.
And there are other spheres of possible conflicts. One is in cyberspace, the other is in outer space. Is there a threat of military confrontation in that two spheres?
Well, it depends on how you define cyber attacks, because in cyber area, the biggest confusion is for you to differentiate cyber attack or cyber espionage. Nobody would claim that I'm doing.
It's very hard to define.
It's very hard to define it. But what is interesting is in 2013, Moscow and Washington actually have signed a kind of a bilateral agreement on not, for example, attacking each other's critical infrastructure. Maybe the day will come when China and the United States, as I have written in my latest opinion, maybe one day the United States and China would wish to exchange a list of sensitive infrastructure that should not be attacked.
Be off limits.
Yeah, at any time. That is maybe one day it will be like this. But in outer space, the question is always whether it goes into peaceful use of the outer space or militarization of outer space.
But the newest development from the U.S. side is Trump administration.
Yeah, Space
Force established.
Yes.
So that seems to suggest the direction that you're asking.
Well, certainly Trump has initiated a kind of militarization, if not a weaponization of outer space, because the American Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, has said that he will keep a laser-sharp focus on China. China is a pacing threat, while Russia is immediate adversary. But the point is, on the outer space issue, most of the countries are on the side of China and Russia, who actually have tabled a joint draft first in 2008 and then renewed in 2014 of asking of no deployment of weapon whatsoever in outer space. Because in 1967, the first treaty on outer space is just called Outer Space Treaty, which prohibits weapon of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, to be placed in orbit.
But that's 50 years ago, and
Yeah.
a lot of things happened.
Yeah, but China's proposal and Russia's proposal is not any weapons to be deployed. And this is welcomed by international community. But the United States in 2008 vetoed 4 UN resolutions on such matters.
But all those military conflicts of another scale and dimension is unimaginable for us. We have never been this area before. Why don't those countries sit down and map up a new convention on where we should do, where we can, in both terms of cyber and outer space?
Yeah, this is actually an issue we are facing now. When we have the capability to wage war on land, there was
which is very
land
unlikely
warfare.
for major powers.
And now, I don't think any country can deny such a possibility to wage war in cyberspace or in outer space, because we are there at this moment. And the big challenge is, can we have some rule of law? You mentioned convention, international, and also bilateral. In China, in the United States, can we reach agreement?
And Russia.
And some other major powers in the world to reach such a convention agreement
No, we
to
can't.
abide by such a rule of law. At this moment, you
Because
can't.
it's asymmetry there.
Yeah.
No. Let's talk about outer space. For decades, people are trying to make another treaty, as you have mentioned. But the problem is, it's very hard to define what is a weapon in outer space. For example, if a satellite,
So we need clarity.
if a satellite get too close to your satellite, this satellite could become a weapon. And there are many other issues. But the point is, people have to, first of all, agree that everybody is vulnerable in outer space. Then we can have an agreement. Because the United States have even more assets in outer space,
Okay.
having more satellites.
Then you come to a very important point that we have to discuss. That is technology. Do you think the technology war or confrontation between the U.S. and China will undermine our technological prowess in military and in civilian down the road?
No, I think it's not a secret that both China and the United States, or even Russia, are just trying to speed up its own technological advances to prevail over others. Because these are reflected in basically 3 areas. One is cyber, another is artificial intelligence, the third is outer space. Because we haven't talked about AI, artificial intelligence. The problem is, because this area is still under development, therefore,
But fast development.
Yeah, therefore it is crucial for countries, for example, China and the United States, to lead in such discussions, because once AI is deployed militarily,
It will change war.
it is hugely
Dramatically.
expensive. So it's very unlikely that these decision makers will just come back to what was the situation.
It will overwhelm decision making on the battlefield.
Yeah, so we now need to discuss about such matters seriously. People already started have
But the
discussed all this.
military aspect of this is so alarming because both sides want to claim supremacy in this area.
Right.
It means a kill for sure solution.
Yeah.
Will that escalate the tensions between the two sides because it's so important for us?
Yeah, I think the military has been the most sensitive area to absorb the advanced technology, AI technology, outspace technology, and the cyberspace technology. I think the big issue, if you look at the nuclear use, I mean in military, we can find some way to out of current dilemma. At the very beginning, I mean, in late 1940s, the United States denied the proposal from Ireland to give a treaty to restrict the military use of nuclear power in military. And the U.S. said, no, not at this moment. Only when in late 1960s, the United States said, yes, we can have a treaty with other countries, an international treaty, to behave all the countries in the military use of nuclear power. So in 1970, there is agreement to define the military use of nuclear power. And if we look at today's technology development, we still face such a challenge. We should have some conventions, agreement, or treaties to behave all the military activities in outspace, in cyberspace, and in some areas.
In the context, there is some partial decoupling between China and the U.S. Do you believe China can still become having a modernized military force by the year 2035 as planned?
I'm absolutely confident about that because decades ago, the United States and Western countries have embargoes on China. And what has happened? Chinese military still developed by leaps and bounds. If you don't believe in what I said, just look at the Tiananmen parade. If you look at the parade in Tiananmen Square, the question for you is to think, what kind of weapons China doesn't have, right? So you basically have all kinds of weapons in the basket, in the inventory, and it's on display. So sanctions don't really work on China.
You also think so, Mr. Tong?
Yeah, this is actually a result of our state system. And also, this is just to show the wisdom of Chinese. And we can do everything at this moment, including the development in military. We developed a new battleship, satellites, and some other advanced weapon system, in recent years. So this is actually the so-called decoupling by the United States will give not any significant impact on the military development of China.
My last question is, we always been assuming we're still living in the strategic window of peace. Militarily, what can we do to ensure that?
Well, I think to ensure peace, you have to be strong militarily, and that is exactly what we are doing. As I said in the beginning, actually this is the conclusion of the Chinese government, that in spite of the vicissitude in the last 100 years, we're still in a strategic period. That shows that we have more confidence than worries, and this is where our strength lies.
You, Mr. Tong?
I think the military, as we discussed just now, is very important for any country to maintain the peace and stability and also integrity of a country. At this moment, I should say the PRA should have such a capability to wage war against any invasion. And on the other side, the PRA should have, the capability to deter the other countries, to deter any country from the possibility to attack China. So there are two capabilities. One is fighting capability. Another is deterrent capability for PRA.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Tong. Thank you, Mr. Zhou. And you've been watching our special program for the 2 sessions, Agenda for Progress. Today's topic is national defense. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.